Welcome to the Crucible, our weekly discussion focusing on the topics we find important as secular humanists. I'm your host for the evening, Skids the Clown, and before we get started, I'd like to say hi to everybody out in the chat. Thank you for stopping by, and if you like what you see on this channel, please remember to hit that like button, share this video, and subscribe to the channel if you'd like to see more content from the Promethean secular frontier. And also make sure to check out this channel's other shows, The Secular Soapbox and The Bible Says What. And don't forget to visit our website where you can find links to all of our content, including our Discord channel. There you can find a great place for open discussions with members of the community, fun topics like science and entertainment, and even fun game nights to join. So with all the pleasantries out of the way, let me introduce our other host for the evening, the Borg Skeptic. How you doing this evening?
I am doing absolutely fantastic. A bit of a late night last night, talking to, I think everyone knows who.
Yes, I heard that you were up late and kind of a little bit stuck with a headache afterwards, but that's kind of expected from that conversation.
Yeah, so that was a long night. I sort of wish I had the 2 hours back and I was able to watch Bryce's show, one of the other hosts that we have on this channel. He was premiering his new show last night, and I hear it went absolutely fantastically. So
yes, it did. Yes,
wish him the best of luck with that.
Great. Well, why don't you tell us who our guest is for this evening?
Well, before I do that, I would just like to mention to everyone in the chat that we will be taking questions and answers at the end, roughly around about the 50-minute mark. So if you have any questions for me, Skids, or the guest, please leave those in the chat and we will put them up on screen at the end and get those questions asked.
Absolutely.
Without any further ado, let me bring in the guest for tonight. So our guest for tonight is a prominent member of YouTube, works with the ACA, and that is Objectively Dan. He, is an ex-Christian, atheist, sentientist, and creator and host of the Truth Wanted talk show. How are you doing tonight, Dan?
I'm doing great. Excellent reading of my Twitter profile there. Do appreciate that.
So before we get started on our subject for the night, is there anything you'd like to tell the audience about yourself? Kind of get them all warmed up to who you are?
Yeah, so for those who don't know, I am the creator and host of the ACA's Truth Wanted. It is a live call-in show that happens Fridays at 7 p.m. Central Time. If you've seen the Atheist Experience or Talk Heathen, I'm part of the same network that makes those shows. And the difference with my show is we talk about what people believe and why. So we're talking about Christianity, we're talking about religions, but we're also talking about aliens. We're also talking about Bigfoot. We go into all kinds of topics. So it's pretty awesome. And I have a new special guest every single week when I do it as well. So check it out if you haven't already.
Wonderful. So we're going to actually switch gears a little bit tonight, not talk about Christianity or anything like that. Tonight's topic is ethical veganism. So before we get into that subject, let's kind of start, what might be one of the things to really consider about why vegetarianism and veganism might be ethical, and that's the subject of factory farming. Can you tell us a little bit about exactly what factory farming is?
Yeah, for sure. So, factory farming is kind of this term to describe the progressive changes of farming systems, particularly in the Western world, but also in other places around the world. Just talking about the efficiencies that come with farming, if essentially make it like a factory system, like we're creating concrete blocks or any other kind of product, right? So we've turned our farming systems into something similar. We think about the idyllic image of what a farm is like, and maybe you see some country couple with their overalls and their pitchforks, and they're just out in the fields with their cattle. But at least in the United States and a lot of the Western world, that's quickly gone away. It's changed drastically in the past couple of decades as far as how we do farming. We're farming not only shipping to locally, but also internationally. And so by doing that, we have all kinds of systemic changes to the system and how we produce the products, including the speed and efficiency by which those animal products are out. And as a result, it has caused undue harm to the animals of which they were, raised in those systems, to the point where it is actually illegal in a lot of places to film inside those places. They have a lot of ag laws, as it's called, particularly in Australia. This was a big deal when you guys familiar with the film Dominion came out a couple of years ago, narrated by Joaquin Phoenix, who's also a vegan. They talk about this, and all the footage in that movie, most of it is from inside factory farms in Australia. And so, there's a lot that happens that people just aren't aware on a public level. And, the people who have invested interests in these companies might not want people to know. And that's why that stuff exists. So it's a wild phenomenon to look at, especially when you learn the ins and outs of exactly how the food that we eat every day is made, which, most people don't know where their food comes from. So it's something to consider.
Yeah, exactly. And you hinted on the impact on the animals itself. But before we get into that, I'd like to kind of go over like maybe some of the impact on the environment. So when they set up these factory farms, which can almost be set up anywhere, where I live, they're setting one up, maybe 10 miles away from me, and this is going to be like a chicken farm. And that's one of the things they talk about, is that they can set up this farm just anywhere that there's available space, bring in people to help run the facility and everything like that. Yeah. So they're talking about, how it produces jobs, how, they're trying to sell it as these are the pros of such a system, providing jobs and effectively being able to produce meat and have it available at a lower price and stuff like that. But there's got to be like negative, not just for these chicken farms, but for all factory farming, negative impacts on the environment where they do this kind of stuff. Are you familiar with this kind of effect?
Yes. Well, when we talk about climate change, and hopefully I don't have to convince your audience that climate change is real, right? I'm going to work on the assumption
I'm hoping not.
Yeah, I'm going to work on the assumption that we all believe climate change is a thing. When we think of the biggest causes for climate change, we usually think of transportation. We usually think of fossil fuels, and we're usually thinking of, those kinds of industries. But what we don't always think about is agriculture, specifically animal agriculture. Animal agriculture globally is one of the biggest contributors to climate change, okay, on a couple of different levels. I mean, in greenhouse gases in particular, in the United States, this actually isn't as bad, but in the developing world, we do see a lot more of an impact there. The big things that people like to point out in popular conversations, of course, like methane in the cows and stuff. And yeah, exactly. That's true. I'm not, I'll acknowledge that. It's not our biggest threat though, because we have to consider more than just the actual animals being farmed here. We have to consider that there's transportation that goes into these industries, that there's infrastructure that's put up for this. We're using lots of land resources, not only for the animals themselves, but for the food to actually grow for these animals. Like, so much of our plant agriculture is given straight to animals. And people often point out that, like, yes, we could be using that land for other kinds of purposes. Now, I'm not talking about non-arable land. I'm not talking about land where we couldn't do anything with it anyway, so we might as well use animals for it. I'm talking about land that we are currently using for production, for feed production that goes straight to other animals, right? And so you have to consider all of these costs that go into this industry, and it's always going to be there. There's always going to be huge costs, no matter how efficient these systems are in the bringing up of animal agriculture, just because it's the nature of the beast. There's always going to be environmental costs with it.
Yeah, absolutely. And you definitely hit that correct, because here I'm in Nebraska in the United States, which is kind of a big spot for growing grains for feed. So, I mean, just countless fields filled with corn and soybeans and everything like that. Then most of it is already earmarked for feed grain. So it sits in the fields for longer than it needs to. They usually don't harvest it until very late in the year. And just tons of it. I don't think any of what we grow for corn in at least my area goes to actually human consumption. It's all feed corn. And just fields as far as the eye can see that are dedicated just to that.
Yes.
And you didn't even mention like water, because I know it's water is another resource that's being consumed by the huge amounts of animals that we use for food.
Yes. Yeah. Water consumption is big as well. Of course, people who like to argue against it saying, well, it's mostly rainwater, it's mostly green water, as they call it, that's going into these things. But, water usage is still water usage. Okay. There's still a cost to it regardless. And all of these costs that I'm talking about here as well, we don't necessarily see in the market, because when we're thinking of animal products, a lot of people make the point that, a lot of animal products are actually cheaper than some vegan products. And we wonder why that is. Well, part of it is because of subsidies that go into these industries as well. Think about if you grew up in the United States, every single lunch meal you could have, you had a carton of milk next to it. Why is that? Well, it's because the government does pay to have these industries go into public school systems and again subsidizes these industries to make sure that they're keeping up these products and having the prices that they do. I don't want to quote any statistics that I couldn't tell you exactly, but if we're talking about the cost of a Big Mac, it would be 3 times as much if it wasn't for all of the kind of subsidies for each individual industry that goes into that. I don't quote me on that, but I've seen statistics that suggest such a thing, that the reason why we enjoy the conveniences that we do is not only because of the huge amount of infrastructure and cost that goes into animal product production, but also that we are subsidizing these industries, and so our tax dollars do contribute to that.
Absolutely. I see some stats here, and I don't want to quote them because I don't know how reliable just what I find on the internet can be.
Sure.
But it seems like there are hundreds of millions of chickens being slaughtered every day. There worldwide, there are billions of animals being used for food products on a daily basis. The amount of livestock, according to one resource, is over 50% of all by weight of animal life on this planet is currently livestock for food source.
Yeah.
The other percentages would be 36% for human beings. That leaves only 4% of the animal wildlife to actually be wildlife. So we dedicate a huge amount of resource to livestock for animals that we are planning on slaughtering. With statistics like that, how do we feel as humans that we're treating animals? Or is this the most moral thing that we are doing?
Well, you talking about with factory farming systems in general, or
just our consumption of animal products for food as a whole, I think.
Yeah.
I would assume most of it comes from factory farming, but that is really disturbing numbers considering how much food we consume as a species.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we abstract this process because we don't see the chickens born from start to finish in how this stuff's happening, or how the cows go from start to finish. And so we're so removed from our food systems that it doesn't really go into our consciousness. And I would say that, from my perspective, if I have the choice between causing unnecessary suffering or not causing unnecessary suffering, then I'm going to choose not causing that unnecessary suffering. And
Absolutely.
that's the basic principles of my veganism. There's a lot of other ethical considerations that, of course, we can go into in time. But if somebody asks me, why am I doing this? Why do I care? Well, because we don't have to. We don't have to subsist on the systems that we have today. Do some people have to because of their current geographic or financial situations? Absolutely. But we created that. Right, we created those systems, and we can change them and dismantle them how we please, because we're the ones that made them in the first place. We don't have to subsist off of factory farmed animal products. It's not necessary. We can make changes to happen. Are they slow? Is it going to take time? Is it going to take a lot of changed minds? Absolutely. Doesn't mean that we shouldn't try, though. Doesn't mean that we shouldn't try.
Absolutely.
So talking about obviously the suffering that you just mentioned there.
Yeah.
Let's take a chicken, for instance, within a chicken farm within it's been factory farmed.
Okay.
Do you know anything about the conditions that for that particular, for just like one of those chickens in there?
Well, first, let me ask you: do you guys know how long a chicken lives on average?
Like in one of the farms, or
sure,
just
yeah, just a factory.
I honestly don't have a clue.
So 4 to 5 years. Do you know the average life of a chicken on a factory farm in the United States?
I would say it's drastically shorter.
42 days. 42 days. So we don't even kill full adult chickens, really. I mean, really, they're still in their infancy. Of course, chicken biology is different from human biology, right? I'm making an analogy here. They're not actually in their infancy, but the way that we've bred these chickens, we're maximizing our value from them. So the chickens that lay eggs and the chickens that we raise for meat are actually two different breeds of chickens, at least in the United States, that we use. So if we're talking about egg laying chickens, there's a lot of harm that goes into that. I'll start with those first. Okay. So egg laying chickens. First of all, if we're at a breeder's ground, because not where they breed chickens and where they actually raise the chickens are two different facilities. Sometimes they're with the same companies and stuff. Sometimes they do trade through different companies. But if we're talking about egg laying facilities, a chicken that's born a male, they don't need, so they kill it instantly. And there's footage of this you could look up online where they put these male chickens on a conveyor belt right into a shredder and kill them instantly, because you don't need male chickens. Male chickens are useless to that industry. They already they can inseminate, or they can have a rooster for all the chickens that they want. They pick the best roosters for their own goals, right? But the female chickens are the ones that they're primarily interested in. So when they incubate all those eggs and they find out that they're raised, they can put them in the shredder. Sometimes they will put them into chambers where they are gassed to death, usually in CO2. There's different methods of slaughter that we have considered ethical and humane. And the reason why I say that we've considered that is because legally sometimes they have to, because there are regulations, and it's going to vary on place to place. But like these are considered like FDA, right? Not FDA, excuse me. Depending on your regulatory body, it's going to be different. But these are considered the most humane forms of slaughter for these animals. Now, if I wouldn't want my children to be put on a conveyor belt and put into a shredder if I deem them unworthy. But, we don't think of chickens the same way that we do with human beings, obviously. Right. And therein lies the problem. So like, why should we care about this at all? And I can go into that in a second, but like you asked specifically about chickens in particular, and that's what happens with egg laying chickens. With chickens that are raised for meat, it's a bit different. They're raised to be fattened up as much as possible. They're put into holding facilities, and they're put with mostly the lights off for most of their life, because the lights that are bright on, they tend to be more active, so they keep them in the dark, and they keep them in holding pens, in sometimes larger facilities. Sometimes they put them in caged ones. It's going to depend on where you go, but in the United States, you see these large floors where they have all these chickens in one place, and they're prone to disease. They're prone to osteoporosis. Over 90% of the chickens that come from those facilities have some form of osteoporosis or broken bones, because they're not actively being taken care of. Their health is just so much as that they're still alive and fat by the end of their lives. so that they're raised for food. And in order to avoid injury for being so close to each other, their beaks are shaved off towards the beginning of their life. And it's not like a fingernail. That is something that they have a sensory input from. So there's no anesthesia that's given to these animals. That's too expensive. So they just cut them off. And there's different methods of how they do that too. But, I'm just kind of painting a basic picture here. There's a lot of people who have done a lot of great work in talking about the specific processes. But I mean, this is just the highlights of when I first learned. This was very shocking and was wondered, why doesn't anybody tell me about this? But everything I'm telling you today, you can look up yourself, published in, farmers' trade journals, and other people who've made documentaries and written works on the subject have talking about. But, it's not a comfortable subject to talk about. So, but we don't always hear about it. So anyway, that's chickens. I haven't even gotten to the other animals yet, but that's chickens for the most part.
I mean, I think we can all agree that that's just absolutely horrendous conditions for any living thing, and that's brings us round to the morality of of it all.
Yeah,
I mean, we wouldn't. I think you mentioned earlier, we wouldn't do that to our own children if we deemed them unworthy. We wouldn't think that is anywhere correct. I mean, we fought world wars over this, over conditions similar to that, and so completely. I would call it immoral, extremely immoral. No matter whether they're animals or humans, that is just wrong.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And some people might disagree. Some people might say that this is our place in nature and we're allowed to do this. And so I think about it in the sense of, we all have assumptions about our place in the ecosystem, right? And this goes to this idea of carnism, which is our, untested assumptions about the world. Can I talk about this for a bit, or did you have other questions for me?
No, go right ahead.
Yeah. So we think about religion and how, we talked about how it gave us ideas about differences between men and women that were ultimately unjustified, but gave us a stratification in our social hierarchies, right? We were given men positions of power and women were supposed to be subservient. And why was this? Well, because God said so, or because maybe it's this brute fact of nature, but we use these sort of untested assumptions to kind of justify our hierarchies here. And we see the same thing with our relationship to animals. And Christianity in particular is a good example of this. Our animals are supposed to be, for us, we're given dominion over the earth, right? And so our treatment of them isn't necessarily considered as equal as it is with other human beings. We have this theology of the soul and say that animals don't have souls, and so therefore we can kind of do what we want with them, right? In the Gospels, not in the Gospels, excuse me, in the New Testament, Paul talks about how he has a vision that, or is it Paul or Peter now? I can't even remember. Has the vision that they can eat all the meats on the earth, right? That God has given them to eat freely. So, we have these. A lot of things in our culture historically that have guided our ideas about how we should treat other animals. But, in recent years, we've changed a lot of ideas about how we think about animals. A lot of us, I'm assuming, you've had cats or dogs in your lifetime. Yep. But we also know that in Eastern Asian cultures, according to a 2017 estimate, about 25 million dogs are eaten every single year. So we kind of ask ourselves, okay, well, do we think that's bad? Because if we think that's bad, then we do have some ethical assumptions about how we treat our animals. And if we think that doing that to a dog is bad, what is the difference between giving that treatment to a dog and treatment to a pig? And so, we can come up with explanations. We could say, oh, well, one animal is more intelligent than another, but, we don't always treat that the same way with our own species, right? There's definitely people in our lives that we could consider not as intelligent. We have children or babies or people with incapacitated, mental states that we still treat just as well, if not better, right? Well, we can go through these different examples, we say, well, a dog, we own that dog, they're our property. Okay, well, so is it the rights of people to own animals in the first place, that's one way to go down. But also, are we to say that a dog on the street, if we were to just kick it and treat it as we liked or treat it as food, that we were just as justified? Well, no, because we recognize that they're sentient beings that have some sort of pain, that have some sort of stimulus there. And we recognize that because we're also evolved beings on this earth that have a similar kind of stimulus. So we can empathize with that. And the truth is, pigs, cows, chickens, they all have those stimulus as well, just as much as pigs. I mean, just as much as dogs or cats or other kinds of domesticated animals. But we don't come in with the same kinds of assumptions. In India, as is famously known, the cow is a very venerated animal that they don't treat the same way that we treat here in the United States. It's a lot harder to find a burger in most places in India. Mm-hmm. And why do they have that? Well, that's a religious assumption that they have, right? It may not be completely based on science, but like we recognize there's a cultural difference there. And if we as secular humanists are people who like to break down religious traditions, like to break down, untested cultural assumptions, then we really have to look at our relationships with animals. Whether or not you come to the conclusion that I do as a vegan is up to you, but we can't live continuously the way that we are without at least examining our relationships there, because something is amiss in the way that we practice our cultures and the way that we treat, our everyday animals in our lives. I don't know about you, but I love my cat. I'd be very upset if I tried to eat it or if somebody else tried to eat it, because I know they don't have to. Right. So anyway, this is me talking for a while. I don't know if you guys had any other questions for me. But
I think, I like the point where you're touching on the intelligence, and, I think it comes down to like, how are we actually categorizing intelligence? Because I remember one of the little facts I learned when I was a kid doing, going around the farms and things like that was how intelligent cows are. Specifically, they might not be intelligent the same way we are, but memory-wise, they are extremely intelligent. Memory-wise,
absolutely,
extremely good memories.
And pigs are the same way. They're very
pigs as well.
Now.
So these
Remember
animals
Babe?
are intelligent in their own ways.
Exactly.
That's a real pig in that movie. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, like you can train a pig to do almost anything a dog can do. I mean, exactly. they've showed this all the time. So like if and intelligence is already a murky thing, right, for a lot of people. But even that aside, I don't particularly consider intelligence to be the difference in how I treat another person. I take Jeremy Bentham's principle of whether a being is capable of suffering. I think that is more meaningful to me. And I think that says something more true to how we treat each other as well. Because, like I said, we don't just do whatever we want with a baby or say that that's just okay. But for most of us don't, right? We recognize, that baby can still suffer. I think that is an underlying principle that most of us can share and understand. And that's what guides a lot of how I understand my relationships to animals.
So do you think like legislation is an answer to some of these problems? Do you think if enough people start to object to the way that these factory farms are run with their treatment of animals, that they would still be able to produce enough meat for people who are interested in eating meat, but the animals are treated better? Or is that really not compatible?
It's already been happening. So like the modern animal rights movement is really began in the 1970s up until now. We've seen a lot of legislation change both in the United States and in other countries for various reasons, right? So like it used to be that you could transport an animal across state lines without ever having to care about its food or water consumption, right? There were no laws saying that you had to feed or water those animals. Now there has to be a period within 24 hours that you water that animal. Do you know when that was changed?
I'm guessing recently.
Like 3 years ago. So, like it's we're making some of those changes, and some of those changes have happened. I know recently I've read about changes in the systems I was telling you about with the slaughter of chickens being bored and stuff, and there's changes in the space of cages for chickens in the the European Union has made some changes as far as like the spaces allowed with those chickens and stuff. So like that's already been happening, but the changes are often really small and can be inconsequential. We've had years and years to look at this and to develop the systems that we have today, and the results we have are absolutely horrifying. So I think it would take more radical change, and whether or not people would still have access to the products they would want to make these changes happen. Yeah, I think it could happen. But for me, I just ask the question of why, why even take these animal products if you don't absolutely need them, So, but I'm at a different place where I'm at a place where I can get supplements for myself if I need to, where I have at least a knowledge of the subject enough of what I need for my body, and the availability of vegan goods are more accessible to me than other places. Now, granted, when I say vegan goods, I'm talking about specialized vegan products. There's a lot of things that are just vegan that you can eat. Like you can just eat an apple, and that's vegan. But like that's not what we mean. But we want to encourage a balanced and healthy lifestyle, which I want people to have too. So to answer your question, I don't know if I did, but we can probably stand to do more. I'm not an explicit expert on the legal situations of individual countries. But at least in the United States, absolutely.
Yeah. And I do think there is a little bit of, just that information that we've been sharing tonight about how animals are treated and stuff like that is not widely known. It's people just kind of, it's not known, or people just put it out of their minds. They don't want to think about it because it's too inconvenient to think about that. And this is the way people decide they want to prepare their meals and everything like that. I know for a fact that growing up, I never was really taught how to cook anything that's not meat based. So that would be a huge change. But I guess, like you were saying, this is kind of what some people are doing. If you want to avoid this whole situation, you need to make a change. So what are some of the alternatives that we could do? Do you have to go full vegan, or are there some changes that we can do that are smaller changes to kind of get our feet wet first?
Well, here is the neoliberal response, okay, which is the purchase of vegan products will increase the demand for those products. And the evidence of that is pretty clear. There's more vegan options today than there were 10 years ago or 20 years ago. And that is because of an increase of demand for those products, and companies are willing to sell more, alternatives and stuff. So, there is that round. You want to be able to support the people that are making that stuff, even and local places too. If you're in Austin, then there's lots of vegan places to choose from, and that's always going to help. So that's one thing to consider. But any time that you are giving money over to an animal product, even if it's just for a restaurant, because a restaurant is going to order only so much of that animal product for themselves, and then it compounds into that it's a systematic thing, right? So like the criticism people have of this is, well, what does how does that one individual make the difference? And the truth is, on a wide scale, I don't, as one single person. But social movements don't happen with just one person. They happen with lots of people acting at once. So if you can do a meatless Monday, do a meatless Monday. If you can go full vegan, go full vegan. I switched pretty fast when I decided I was going to do it, and I know most people aren't capable of doing that, or just don't have the ability to, for one reason or another. But like, making that transition happen is important. Thinking about it and being aware is important. To just say, well, to hell with this, it doesn't matter, this is beyond me. If people had that attitude, then we wouldn't have made the changes we've already had today. We wouldn't have the vegan products that we have today. I would rather live in today's world than the world of 50 years ago in terms of that stuff. So
exactly.
It's creating paths. It's educating people. It's having conversations like this one and being honest with ourselves and saying, hey, maybe the things we've been doing up to this point could use a change. So
what do you do when you go to a restaurant and there's not a vegan option?
Well, you got to improvise sometimes. I mean, like, if you can get a salad, you can get a salad, you know, but I think it's interesting how many people don't realize the difference of what is vegan and what isn't in a lot of products. You know, I tell people stuff that's vegan or isn't vegan all the time, and they get really surprised. Like Oreos is a fun one. People think that Oreos aren't vegan. They are. That's not dairy in that cream. That's high fructose corn syrup and all kinds of other stuff, you know. Or that bread. I literally had this conversation today with somebody who thought that I couldn't eat bread because I was a vegan. And I was like, what do you think is in bread that's not vegan? And they thought eggs were in bread, you know? So I don't know. I think there's more options than people really think out there, you know, in terms of what we can eat and what's available at restaurants and stuff. Now, if you go to like, I don't know, some barbecue joint here in Texas, yeah, you're going to have a harder time than maybe somewhere else. But there's usually more than what people think.
Yeah, but to be fair, though, if you're going out for a vegan meal, you're not going to be... You're a bit of an idiot if you're walking into a barbecue joint. That's specifically for a vegan meal.
listen. I am I'm a minority where I'm from, right? None of my family's vegan. Okay, like most of my friends aren't vegan. I have to live my life. So what do I do with that? Well, I make it work. I explain to people where I'm at, and you know what? If they're good friends and they want to support me and who I am, they're willing to compromise with me and maybe go to a place that has options for me. But, you know, like it starts with kind of being a bit more vocal about it. Unfortunately, you know, there is a stereotype about vegans being preachy, and people point that out. I mean, hey, the atheist community has the same problem. Okay. Like, it's not like people haven't said that about atheists before, but like, you know, for me, it's more about like, hey, I need to make you aware of this thing so that I can continue to be at peace with myself when I live my life. It has honestly nothing to do with the other people that I tell them. It's just more like, hey, I got to eat something here. So this is what I need to do. Yeah, it's awkward sometimes, but I'm a little more used to it now. So actually, you know, that, you know, brought up a question in my mind, you know, talking about militant veganism. These people who specifically go around, like, say, McDonald's and spread red paint all over the customers and all of that, you know, in symbolism of the blood being spilled. And what are your thoughts on that side of veganism? Well, I mean, there's no getting around the fact that McDonald's and other places like them are directly contributing to the violence of animals, okay, and consequently to the destruction of the environment via, you know, contributions to the animal agriculture industry and stuff. But like, hey, like that's a lot of restaurants, okay? There's a lot of McDonald's out there, and so like I as someone who, you know, does a call-in show and who does activism work, like I am very conscious about messaging. I'm very conscious about how we should approach these kinds of conversations, and I would say that for the most part, a lot of those messages probably aren't as effective as, you know, the people who are making them might think. You know, PETA is the one that comes to mind, right? Everybody jokes on PETA, dunks on PETA. I dunk on PETA because they do a bunch of, in my opinion, stupid stuff. But that doesn't stop me from being from putting my best foot forward. Look, there's a lot of atheists in this community that I would rather them not talk, you know, but that doesn't mean that we shouldn't, you know, still draw the same conclusions as them on a lot of issues, right? So yeah, that's out there and it's there, and I do think that a lot of it is overplayed for you know, people who are haters might, you know, highlight these as an example more so than what's actually out there. I think you know, a lot of the vegans I know that I talk to are pretty chill. So I don't know. There's just a lot of stereotyping out there about it.
Exactly.
So, yeah. But see, you know, I've come across I think it was Peter actually who I saw in the UK, and they would, and I didn't agree with what they were doing personally, but you know, they weren't being too militant about it, but. They did show something I was thinking of earlier when we were talking about the, you know, the horrors of the factory farming and that and everything, and you know, people's opinions and how we, you know, the attitudes, the way we think, and they pointed something out which I thought was really good, which was they were on the street and had big TV screens on on the chests, and they were just holding these TVs, and as kids were walking past and everything, and they were showing animals being slaughtered and really obscene sort of imagery and that and everything. But that's obviously what's going on inside these factory farms. And people were getting really angry because, how dare you show this to our children, and the immorality of showing this to children. And it got me thinking, and I was like, well, okay, we classified that as immoral, that we're going to, show these atrocities in front of children, but we're not actually viewing the atrocities themselves as immoral. There's a little bit of a problem there.
Right.
Yeah.
That's a very good point.
Yeah, it is a good point, because like, if you're just showing footage of what is happening right now to the food that you eat, and you have a problem with that, then you have a problem with factory farming. And people don't like to come to that conclusion because it messes up everything. Like it's when I'm an ex-Christian, right? And so like that whole journey, changed the way that I live my life now. And that's hard. And that's why most people don't go that route, because there's a lot of changes that happen there. And the same thing happens when you come to the conclusions that, hey, the food systems that we have need to change, because that affects me literally every day. Every single meal I eat now is in effect of that. And like, it's already hard enough to like go on a diet, let alone, decide that you can only eat a certain group of foods. So I get it. I think our social psychology naturally has kind of primed us to not make those radical changes, but that doesn't mean that, unfortunately, that what we're doing is right, or that we should continue to justify things just because it's hard to make a change. We have to make a change at some point, in my opinion. But some people might disagree. Some people may want to see the world burn. I don't know.
Yeah, exactly. So what do you think of the concept of lab-grown meats?
It's awesome. Cool. Go for it. I'll try it.
Have you tried it? I guess I haven't tried it yet.
I don't think there's any places commercially available here where you can do that. I know the most recent place to kind of give that out for certain locations is in Singapore, and I've heard a lot of people talk about that experience and stuff. But yeah, I mean, like, my problem isn't that I don't think meat tastes good. It is the problem is what goes into the making of that meat. So yeah, I don't have an issue with it, unless there's some sort of crazy environmental impact that factory grown meat has. But I don't think it's any more so than what we're currently doing with our factory farm systems.
Yeah, so I can't imagine it being as impactful as that. So I don't know the process. I don't know what goes into it. I would have concerns. It's like, how unnatural is it, because I do have some kind of, mindset where it's like, I don't want to eat something that's completely made out of chemicals. So,
okay.
I don't know much about it. I would rather eat something, farm fresh in my mind. Whether that is logical or not, I guess I need to look more into it.
Yeah, I mean, I would say that our animals are not natural in any way whatsoever.
I totally agree.
So
they inject the animals with so many different chemicals and stuff like that. You don't know exactly what you're eating. So, but I guess I would lean more towards the idea of toying with veganism, because at least I know that I can grow my own vegetables and stuff like that to eat.
Yeah. If you have the land to do it, that'd be awesome.
Which I do. I'm fortunate enough, but I know that I am not. My situation is nowhere close to what most people's situation.
Sure.
Would be, so.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, a big difference is, I plan out my meals a lot more. That's a good thing for me. I should have been doing that before, but
actually, I should be doing that. So. I talk about this if only because I think when these conversations tend to come up, the conversation of privilege and access tends to come up, and people say, well, you can't just force veganism on everybody. Not everybody can do it right now. And I'm fully cognizant of that. And most vegans are. I think it's unfortunately a talking point that becomes a straw man at some point where for a lot of vegans are saying, no, everybody has to do it right now. No, we
most of us recognize, it is a gradual change in that process. I can't expect somebody to quit smoking in a day. I'm not going to expect somebody to quit meat in a day either. So,
Exactly.
I don't approach it with that mindset. However, I am conscious of the fact that, like, even if you're just cutting out dairy, even if you're just doing a meatless Monday, like, that's going to be way better than not doing anything at all. So, like, why not start there, or at least try, or do something.
And like cutting out dairy, that it would be hard for me, just because I'm a big fan of cheese. But the nice thing is, we're living in an age where, when I was a kid, things like almond milk and soy milk and all those were not an option at all.
Yeah.
At least there are alternatives that you can use for a lot of your daily needs that you would use like milk or other dairy products for. It's like you cut a little bit out here and there, and then you realize you don't need it. So that goes a long way.
Absolutely.
Yeah, or even if you're just putting, putting your vote into a petition, or putting in a little bit of money to a group that's trying to get rid of some of the subsidizing of the meat industry, these factory farms and that are being given free money to continue on with these atrocities that are taking place.
Yeah, absolutely.
Exactly. Yeah. So do we have any questions in the chat so far?
We do. Moderators in the chat, if I miss any questions, please copy and paste them at the end, and I'll get any that I miss. I've been looking back, and actually I've got to put them up on screen for 2 secs. I'll just scroll back. I found them in the wrong screen. There we go. There we go. Right. A question from Ron. So, should we stop castrating our pets? Because this would be a form of torture.
Great question. It comes up in these conversations. What we mean when we're talking about neutering our animals and stuff. And so, there's a lot of vegans that are undecided about this issue. I think if you got 100 vegans in the room, I would wager to guess that most of them are fine with neutering for a couple of reasons. So, I mean, the environmental impact that unneutered animals have, of course, cats in city areas and stuff where it's not their natural environment, isn't helpful for the cats, right? For them to reproduce and grow up in areas. My cat is a stray, found in an urban environment, and I don't know what his story is, but he has feline leukemia, and in cats, feline leukemia is spread through. It can be spread through cats. It's different from humans. Humans, they can't spread it the same way, but it is communicable. It's one of the largest killers of cats in urban environments in the world, and we can prevent the further unnecessary suffering through the neutering of animals. So, in that sense, I'm in support of it. And also, when we perform these procedures, it's not like we're not anesthetizing these animals, and it's not like we're not giving them, any sort of care. And they may not, we don't know for sure the entire psychology of an animal, but it's never been demonstrated in a laboratory setting that a cat or a dog is more depressed than another cat or dog that is able to have children versus one that isn't. So, in that sense, in arguments of total harm, we're not making the same kind of harm that we would be castrating a human, against their will. So, yeah, I would say that I'm pro in that sense, but for those reasons.
Oh, thank you. That's a good answer. We've got Junius. Next question. Would you consider a human killing and eating ants or worms as being immoral or moral? Do they suffer? If so, why? If not, why? If no, why not?
Yeah, so the topic of insects is an interesting one as well, and it's one that I don't have a clear answer for, and most people don't. There's a lot of research as to how insects understand suffering, how they understand pain, how they relate to their environment, and there's just a lot that we don't know. I tend to play it safe if I can. I don't have a necessarily reason to eat an insect at the moment. There is I think there might be some evidence out there that could suggest that certain species could understand pain in a way that might be somewhat similar to how we do. But that aside, I don't know if I need to do it. So I won't. That's pretty much the end all for me. I'd rather play it safe than presume otherwise. But yeah, as far as specific species of worms, I couldn't tell you. I wouldn't know the answer.
Mm-hmm. Next question from the EA show, our friend Khalil. How are you doing tonight, Khalil? He wants to ask, Dan, what issues would you have with halal meat?
Oh, well, halal meat, I mean, the ceremonies that go through, that those animals go through are also, I mean, really, really bad. I mean, we're talking about the cutting open of the necks of these animals while they're still alive, again, unanesthetized. So it's not great. The bloodletting is just, a human thing or a religious thing. As far as I know, there's no particular benefits to eating halal meat over other kinds of meat. I could be wrong on that. I'm not an expert on it, but yeah, I don't see it as a better way of getting our what we need, which is the proteins and other kinds of stuff that to run our bodies. I don't see it as ethical, so I don't need it. Don't think it should happen.
I'm just looking through now to see if we've got any others. I think that's the end of the questions. Yeah.
Awesome.
Cool.
Well, thanks everyone in the chat for submitting those questions.
Yeah. Thank you very much for for all those questions. Definitely.
Yeah, hope we got you some good answers, and if you need anything else, let us know. But in the meantime, looks like we're getting kind of close to the top of the hour. So can you remind everybody, Dan, where they can find you?
Yeah, absolutely. So again, I'm Objectively Dan. You can find me on Twitter at Objectively Dan, where I shitpost a lot. But outside of that, if you want to follow my activism work, I mostly do that through the atheist community of Austin, through my show Truth Wanted. It's live Fridays at 7 p.m. Central. You can find it on YouTube or iTunes, Spotify, wherever else you get your podcasts. And go check it out. It's a cool show. I will not be on tomorrow's episode. Sorry, not tomorrow. Friday's episode. But I'm usually there on all the other ones. So go check it out.
Yeah, and we haven't got them in the description at the moment, your links, but we will put them in the description. I was running a little bit behind before the show today, so I didn't get a chance to put them in, but we'll definitely get those in the description for
awesome.
you. Thank you very much for the conversation, Dan. I know you're a bit strapped for time, so we'll let you get going, but thank you very much for joining us, and we'll hope that we'll be able to get you on again.
Yeah, thank you guys. I'm really glad we're having this conversation. I think it's one that's not talked about enough in our communities, and I'm happy to see more talk of it. So I'll always be there for that.
Absolutely, and I'll give you something to think about. Hopefully, I really enjoyed the conversation, and it definitely got me thinking.
Great, yeah, great. That's all I can do.
Got me thinking as well. I'm quite shocked with some of the treatment of just like some of these animals and the morality of it. I mean, what we consider to be
I didn't
moral.
even get to the half of it. We didn't even talk about cows.
We could probably do a whole show just on cows.
Really I like cows. I really do like cows. You'd have got me crying if you'd started talking about cows.
Sorry for jumping back in, but I gotta say, Dan, you make me rethink what I'm doing every time I listen to you speak. So, and that's a good thing.
Thank you, guys.
Appreciate you speaking out about this.
Look. I'll put it this way. I didn't think I was going to be the atheist guy like 5 years ago, but I ended up. I mean, I had to do what I thought was true, and it's the same thing with this. I didn't think I was going to be the vegan guy talking about vegan stuff, but I can't ignore it now. I know too much, so it's just one of those things, So and
Exactly.
we have a community that's like not ready for it and needs to be ready for it, because we've seen a lot of changes in the past couple of years in terms of social justice. I think this is another topic that needs to be addressed. So we'll see.
Absolutely.
I have a quick question for you, Dan.
Yeah.
When do you think veganism will be like mainstream? When do you think it will be a sizable minority and not just a fringe thing?
It's hard to say. I mean, in the past, so the latest statistics I've seen is I believe in the past 4 years, but this was like a 2018 study, I think. In the United Kingdom, the number of vegans in the country doubled in 4 years. So that's one metric I see. There's more vegans per person in the UK than there is in the United States. The United States still doesn't have as large percentage wise, but it's catching up and it's growing, and it seems to be growing amongst a lot of Western nations. But I think we're still a bit a ways away, because the progress that we've seen in social movements in the past 10 years have been like on the news every night, because of related stories and huge key players commenting on them, and podcasters talking about them, and social justice movements, shows like this are talking about it more. And we haven't seen that same level in the vegan community, although it has been growing in the past couple of years. A lot more channels and stuff are out there, and a lot more organizations doing advocacy work are out there. But it doesn't have the same presence in the everyday person's mind, at least not in a positive sense. It's been dragged through the mud through a lot of there's a lot of evidence of this, of the meat industry and animal product industry actively discrediting and astroturfing vegan stuff from happening, or animal rights stuff from happening, because there is a profit incentive there that we don't see when we talk about atheist movement and stuff, because we're not talking about commodities in the same way. So there's a lot of challenges, and there's a lot of education and nuance that goes into these conversations that people just don't have. It's a lot easier to talk about LGBT rights than it is vegan rights, because it's a lot more straightforward to people, or this talks. I mean, there's just a lot of nuance and a lot of talk of food.
I would say that that's true today.
Yes, true today. Absolutely.
Maybe not 25, 30 years ago. But.
Yeah, I know. That's fair. That's fair. But another change of that is representation too, right? Vegans do not have we've had a larger positive shift towards LGBT community in media being positive, which is great to see. It's not positive everywhere, but damn it, it's a lot more positive than it was before. Vegans have not had that same change at all. So I think that happens. Maybe we'll see a difference, but I don't know. I'm just rambling here. But
no. Thank you
not
for
at all.
answering my question.
Awesome.
Yeah, so thank you very much for everyone who's watched. Again, thank you very much, Dan, for coming on. We have a few shows a week. You can find us here at the Crucible every Wednesday evening, usually between 7 and 9 p.m. Eastern Time, depending on the schedule for the guest. Also, you can find Bryce Aroni and Caleb on a Monday. For the secular soapbox,
except next Monday.
Except next Monday. Next Monday will be Tuesday.
We're doing Tuesday, May the 4th be with you.
Yeah, and that's going to be a special, isn't it? Where all the hosts are together.
That's right. We're gonna have fun talking Star Wars and other stuff. Yeah,
so definitely please check that out, everyone. Also, we do have Michael with the Bible Says What podcast on a Thursday. I believe his first episode is tomorrow. We're going to be putting that up, so please check that out. That's a pre-record, so that'll be premiering and not a live stream, but obviously we'll premiere it, so you're still able to be in the chat. So,
but jump on while it's premiering and get in the chat. We'll probably all jump in the chat and hang out with you.
Of course, definitely. So that's our schedule for the next week. So thank you very much, everyone, and stay home, stay safe, and wear a fucking mask. Thank you, and good night.
Cool. I didn't realize we were still live. I thought we were ending when Bryce showed up.